Hi guys, it's Steffi from the Novelty Corner and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm here with the Books Beside My Bed video. For those of you who are new to my channel, this is where I recap my previous week's worth of reading. This is my reading week from the 1st to the 7th of April. It was the second week of the Superheroathon, so I did finish all 10 of my challenges. I read 7 books, 2,794 pages, and my yearly reading total is up to 59 books. The first book that I read this week was Things We Promise by J.C. Burke. This was for the challenge Captain America Read a Book That Represents Your Country. I don't know if this one represents the country so much as it was written by an Australian author. It is a Lovers YA book and it deals with quite a few heavy topics. It was published in 2017 by Allen and Unwin. This was a copy that I received in a competition, I believe, and I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. This book is not without its problems, and if anyone knows my tab system, you'll know that orange is problematic. These were all words, phrases, things that really bothered me. They all happen within the first 100 pages of the book, and they do reoccur throughout the book, but after that the plot sort of takes over. This is sort of like a historical fiction, but it's set in the 90s and it is set during the time when AIDS became more prevalent, and it deals with the way that suburban Australian people react to anyone diagnosed with AIDS. Told through the eyes of Gemma, who is a young girl in high school who's getting ready for the prom, and her brother, who is gay, is diagnosed with AIDS. Gemma is all about that perfect lifestyle where outward appearance is everything, and so when her brother comes home sick, she has to deal with the repercussions of that and how that affects her relationship with other people and how people then perceive her and her family because of her brother. So it deals with quite heavy topics, and while I don't agree with the language use, unfortunately it was symptomatic of and representative of the time. So I'm really torn on this one because I really wanted to DNF this as I was reading it, but I thought, no, I'm going to push through. I'm going to see what happens. And the story in the second half, I understand what the author was trying to do. There is a little bit of growth in Gemma, but yeah, I would go into this with a whole lot of caution because I think some of this language could be harmful to people if you're not in a good enough, strong enough place to recognise it for what it is. Then I read Mun Mun by Jessie Andrews. This was sent to me for review by Allen and Unwin. This is a 2018 release and it is published by Allen and Unwin, and I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. I read this for the superhero challenge, the Hulk Read a book that's read an intimidating book. And yeah, I picked this because it was an author that I hadn't read, and so that's always intimidating when you start a new author, but really I should have just picked it for the storytelling style, which I knew nothing about before going into it. In the world that Mun Mun is set in, which is similar to Earth but a little bit different, your physical size, so your height, is determined by your wealth, and there is thankfully a little handy map in here that helped me the whole way through trying to visualize how tall everyone was. So the story is told from the perspective of Warner, who is a little paw, so they're about the size of a rat. Warner and his sister Prayer dream of escaping their status and earning enough Mun Mun in order to grow to a larger size. And it starts off as a scheme to marry Prayer off to someone who's much richer than she is, and then using their wealth to help scale her, Warner, and their mother up. So lovely social commentary there on women's values. And that's what it is. This whole book is social commentary on wealth, on status, on treatment of other people, on people judging you based on your size. I mean, it's all of it. So the story goes on and Warner finds himself becoming embroiled in some criminal schemes and then finds himself being used as a political symbol, and then things just go on from there. And it's honestly one of the strangest books I've ever read, and it's not bad. It's just odd. I don't even have the words to describe it properly, so you're just gonna have to trust me and go, if you're looking for something that's a really good social commentary, it's probably worth a read. The other thing that's really interesting about this book is the style of writing that Jessie Andrews used. Because Warner is narrating the story and Warner is illiterate, a lot of words are spelt phonetically or words run together, and so it's a really interesting experience trying to work out, I don't know, for me, because I'm not familiar with the US and a lot of the places in the book are US places, but Warner doesn't know how they're pronounced properly, so it's sort of hard to figure that out for me. But still, an interesting read, and I'm glad that I read it, so thank you, Allen and Unwin, for the review copy. Then I read Defy the Stars by Claudia Gray. This was also sent to me for review by Allen and Unwin. This is a 2018 release from Hotkey Press, and I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. It is the second book in the Constellation series, and I loved it. I loved it, I loved it, I loved it. At the end of the first book, Noemi, who is a soldier for Genesis, and Abel, who is a mechanical, and basically an android, They went their separate paths. She went back to her homeworld, and all of a sudden she is called back into duty when a deadly plague arrives on Genesis, and their paths collide. And oh my gosh, it is just such a wonderful story. I read this for the Superheroathon for the challenge Black Widow. Read a story with a kick-ass main character. Naomi is great in this because she is, at the start of the story, she is really down on herself because of everything that happened in the first book and how she's being treated back on her homeworld. And she has to work her way up to finding her worth again. And she's just so snarky and just deals with everything as it's thrown at her. And I really, really appreciate that in a character because, you know, she has her moments, her down moments, but she also rises to the occasion, and she's not afraid to do the hard things in order to save the people that she loves. And I think that's amazing. So I won't say too much else about the book because it's the second book in the series, spoilers, etc. But this is everything I like about space operas. You have worlds at war, and you have space travel, and you have hyperspace lanes, and just read this series. I think this is one of those underrated series on BookTube. The last book that I read for the Superheroathon was Star Wars Aftermath Empire's End by Chuck Wendig. This is the third book in the Star Wars Aftermath series. I read this for the challenge Thor Read a Book Set in Another World because obviously it's set in another world completely different to ours. It was published in 2017 by Century, and I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. And that's a really heartbreaking 3 for me because I love Star Wars books, and this one it dragged. Like, I like the story and I like the conclusion to the arc and I like the characters, but at the same time, there was just a whole lot of extra stuff going on, and I think this book could have been streamlined a little bit more. Essentially, you've got a sort of a ragtag group of former rebel soldiers and mercenaries and ex-Imperial agents working together to try and bring down the current Grand Admiral Ray Sloane, and Ray Sloane is in turn trying to uncover the mystery of someone who's pulling the strings within what remains of the Imperial Empire. My favourite scenes were anything that involved Han Solo. There was a tiny little scene with Chewbacca, and I wish there'd been more. I'm finding that the new books are really hit and miss in what I find interesting, whereas what are they calling the old series now? I don't know. The one that's now been retconned. That stuff I find a lot more interesting than this, probably because there were films back-ending a lot of these books, and whereas the other books didn't have anything to run up against, so they could just create 40 years worth of history and it was all pictured in your head. I don't know. Maybe that makes me sound weird. The 5th book that I read this week was The Bone Season by Samantha Shannon. This was not on any TBR of mine, but I had the audiobook for it, and I thought, okay, well, I'll read it while I've got the audiobook out from the library because I only had a couple of weeks to read it. To be perfectly honest, I stopped listening to the audiobook after the first couple of chapters because I was reading ahead because I was reading it and listening to it at the same time, and I found myself skipping ahead of the narration, and the narration I had at 2 times speed, so yeah, it just wasn't working for me. The Bone Season was published in 2013 by Bloomsbury, and I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. This was not what I was expecting. I don't know what I was expecting, but it wasn't this. So essentially, you have a world that is like the United Kingdom, but there was a rise in clairvoyance, and the government's response was basically to dub them enemies. And so they've essentially closed off most of the cities and everything is zoned. And you have these underworld lords who control different factions of the city, as well as the government who are seeking to hunt out all the clairvoyants. So our main character Paige is a member of the Seven Seals, which is one of the underground syndicates, and basically the syndicates try and collect as many different types of clairvoyants as they can. There are a lot. There's, a 2-page spread of them in the book, and I had to constantly refer back to that. But one day Paige accidentally kills one of the city's guards and finds herself being hunted, and then she thinks she's going to be imprisoned and tortured, and then she wakes up in Oxford, or what used to be Oxford, and there she discovers that the Rephaim, who are angel-type creatures, but not, they're creepier than that, are actually the ones who helped construct this whole new world system for England for the last 200 years. And the Rephaim collect clairvoyants to do their dirty work because they come from a place called the Ether, which is space that the clairvoyants can access. And basically it's really complicated. There's a whole lot of world building, and that's why this book got a 3 out of 5 stars, because there's a lot of world building and it's fantastic, but it's really, really slow. And there's a lot of information, and I have a really hard time trying to process it down into a succinct summary, so I apologize profusely for that. It was good. I will continue with the second book because I have a couple of theories that I want to see if I'm proven right. It's a bit of a hard slog. So it was good. Like, it wasn't bad. The writing style was good, but it was just dense. And dense books make me really frustrated sometimes because I'm a fast reader, and if it's dense, then it drives me nuts a little bit. The sixth book that I read this week was Ace of Shades by Amanda Foody, and I know in my April TBR, I think I said that Amanda Foody was the author of Freaks. I know she wasn't. It's just my brain is not working this week because head cold, don't mind me. Ace of Shades is an April 2018 release from Harlequin Teen. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. I really enjoyed it. I did receive my copy as an e-arc from NetGalley, so thank you very much to them. The story starts off with a teenage girl, Anne, who is traveling to New Rains, which is sort of this world's Las Vegas city of sin, and she's looking for her adoptive mother, Lourdes, who has not returned. While she's there, she seeks out help from a man named Levi, who her mother had left as a potential contact if something went wrong, and he happens to be one of the crime bosses in the city. She has been raised to be a proper lady, and so she finds pretty much everything at the beginning to be quite offensive and an affront to her ladylike nature. So Anne has to rapidly learn how to adapt and how to survive in this city, and she rapidly finds herself being embroiled in plots and schemes that are driven by other people. It was really interesting. I really enjoyed it. I didn't think I would enjoy it as much as I did. I thought I would enjoy it, but I didn't think I'd enjoy it as much as I did. It was a lot of fun and has a lot of character development. So while she goes from being mildly irritating at the start of the book, by the end of it, she's a really strong character. She finds out a lot of things about herself that she didn't know previously. I don't know, it just was very atmospheric and I really liked that. The last book that I read this week was Squared Away by Annabeth Elbert. This is the 5th book in the Out of Uniform series. It is another April 2018 release from Carina Press, and I gave it 4.5 out of 5 stars. This series follows SEAL soldiers who are developing relationships of various degrees that sit along the LGBTQIA+ spectrum. The main character in this story, Wizard, he is a medic and he sits somewhere on the grey ace spectrum, which was really interesting to read about. Wizard is sent home from a mission when he finds out that his sister and his brother-in-law were killed in a car crash. They have left behind 3 young children, I think 6 and under. His brother-in-law also had a younger brother, Isaiah, who I think like 6 or 7 years beforehand had propositioned Wizard at their wedding and had been turned down. And so the two of them have this sort of very rocky relationship. And when Wizard returns home to the kids, he finds that Isaiah has taken on the role of caregiver in the parents and his absence. And the two begin to cohabitate in the house and try and look after the kids together while the courts figure out who will have custody and who will have legal guardianship of the kids. It's really about Wizard beginning to understand himself and how he relates to people in relationships. And it's about Isaiah being able to understand and respect those boundaries. And it's about both of them learning to respect one another. And at the front of all of this, they've got these kids to care for. And that's what I really loved, was that the big focus was on the kids and the well-being of the kids and how their actions could potentially impact on them. So I really liked it. I love this series. It's very easy to read, very lighthearted. There are some steamy scenes, so if you don't like that, you can really skip through most of that. But there is a really poignant sort of story at the center of it all, which was really, really nice. So those are the books that I read this week. In the comments, let me know what books you read last week. I hope that wherever you are in the world, you're having a wonderful day, and I'll catch you guys in my next video. Thanks so much for watching. Bye, guys.